Hi, Emmanuel Nkoma here. Welcome to the African Institute of Leadership and Governance channel. Right here, wherever you are watching us from, you are at the right platform for your leadership development. Now, leadership is not just about you having influence. Leadership is all about you being able to handle pressure. Remember, leadership is all about showing people the way. Remember, leadership is all about carrying people along. And leadership is solving problems. Here at the African Institute of Leadership and Governance, we have a team that is committed to see to it that your leadership skills are polished and your leadership skills are cultivated. So are you a traditional leader? Are you a religious leader? Are you a civic leader? Are you a political leader? Are you a business leader? This is your platform. Make sure you interact with us on our website and go onto our YouTube channel, click on the push button, and make sure you subscribe so that every time we are on, you are notified. I'll see you again. Thank you for choosing to be part of the African Institute of Leadership and Governance. It's time for Africa, and I say it's time. Wow. Thank you so very much. Those of you who have joined us today from the African Institute of Leadership and Governance. I believe that today we're going to have a great time and a special time wherever you are watching us and you are catching us. We in South Africa, we've been celebrating the Human Rights Day, So this is a great day for South Africa, a great day for Africa. But at the same time, we want to look at what does it mean, having these human rights. What does it entail? So today we want to make sure that you follow us and you come with us on this journey today. I am not alone. Look, I've always been coming to you and we are saying, in order for Africa to be governed well, we need each other. And when we speak about the human rights, I was just listening today to different speeches being made by different political leaders, different organizations. Today, everybody was celebrating and talking about the liberation of South Africa. They remembered the Sharpeville massacre. They remembered what has been going on in the continent. And today, as I come to you, I ask myself this question. As an African, are we having human rights? Are our rights dignified? So we can talk from the social security, cultural responsibility. We can talk about nationalization. We can talk about a lot of things today. So guys, tune in. And those of you from the class, from ICOF, from different classes that we share our thoughts and we teach, welcome. Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me on the panel today, on the panel of my discussion and our discussion, to introduce a fellow colleague and who is going to deliver a speech on the African continent. And as we talk about the human rights, I want you just to get ready, because these are people I respect and these are people that I believe that we are going to sharpen this continent together. We are talking about human rights. Last year, the African Union announced the silencing of the guns. The AU announced the silencing of the guns. But the question has always been asked, are the guns silent? When we talk about silencing of the guns, are the guns silent in Central Africa? Are the guns silent in Eastern Congo, in the Kivu? If we talk about silencing of the guns, we are talking about issues that are real. Are the guns silenced in Sudan? Are the guns silenced when we talk about in Guinea? So we have got a lot of issues that we talk about. And right now, I'm not alone. We are going to move on. Allow me to welcome a scholar and also an African thinker who has come today to deliver to us a lecture. This is no other than my good friend and brother, Mr. Didier Kabwe. He holds a master's degree in political science from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And so we're going to discuss. Remember, I have always said here that political freedom without economic freedom, it's worse than slavery. So allow me to welcome Mr. Kabwe as he comes on the platform. Mr. Kabwe, good afternoon, good evening. We don't know what time people are watching us or people are tuning in. You know, we are talking to the global world. So I want just to say welcome to the African Institute tonight. You can unmute the mic.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel, for having me.
Wonderful. Please, can we
this day?
Yes, great. Let's begin from there, and I want you to take the floor. What does it mean to an African child when we talk about human rights? How do we contextualize this concept of celebrating human rights? Is it well understood? And I want you to go into the dynamics. I want you to look at how can we attain that human beings attain to these equal rights that we talk about. Let me give you the floor and go ahead and please deliver to us a lesson tonight.
Thank you again, Dr. for this opportunity to share ideas, to share this day that we are all as Africans, human rights. We always talk about human rights, and the first question probably would be, what is human rights? We talk a lot about human rights, and we can understand that it is very important to acknowledge that as African, we are coming from far in to understand this concept of human rights. Basically, we can say that human rights is what we call the basic rights and freedom that are recognized to every person from the birth until death. And for us Africans to understand human rights, we know that it inspired from Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed by several countries just 3 years after the Second Cold War. And at that time, it's only 4 countries in Africa that participated in this Universal Declaration Universal of Human Rights. And we can talk about South Africa, Ethiopia. We have Ethiopia and other countries, though so it was only 4 countries, but South Africa at that time couldn't sign because there was segregation and a racial problem called apartheid. So South Africa didn't sign that Declaration of Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have in all constitution in Africa, all constitution, they provide some paragraph dedicated to Bill of Human Rights. And when we look at the South African Constitution in it, chapter 2, from section 7 to 39, you see that they talk about the Bill of Rights, and every constitution in Africa, in African countries, they also provide Bill of Human Rights. So the question is human rights, are they respected? Are they implemented? Probably a doctor that we look at how these human rights are implemented or are not implemented in most of African countries. Yes, doctor, and we will understand that this Universal Declaration of Human Rights inspired even liberation movement that fought to see what can be as a good society where the right of people will be respected. And as the question is to see, are these human rights or these bills of right, are they respected in these respective countries? So probably, doctor, we're going to look at that question after your intervention.
Yes, I was saying the most important aspect that we have to look at now, we have looked at the preamble. Where are we coming from with the declaration? The countries that participated at the time when this Universal Declaration of Human Rights were being made, and that was just after 1939, if I recall very well. Now, at this particular time, we have seen that Africa has begun to expand. Let me welcome the guys from Nairobi. I see Nairobi is they are coming on. I also want to welcome Mr. Zach Zulu from Pumalanga, Mr. Vincent Chibesa also coming from Lusaka following, and there are other many who will be joining us a bit later. Now, I want us to look at after these declarations were made, are there any deliberate steps which our African leaders have to make so that we attain, for example, when we speak about human dignity, if we have just to look at human dignity itself as a human right, of course, when we talk about freedom of speech, to politicians, they view it as going to campaign. But we also know that we have got countries where the people, the individuals, they cannot voice out. We have heard of countries where when people voiced out, others have disappeared. We have heard on countries where when we talk about dignity, I want to state this. There are places where people today, they sleep with only having one meal a day. In other places, we find that they have to walk kilometers to get a hospital, to get medical attention. So if we have to look at the continent, I want us to go beyond South Africa. Because yes, South Africa is looking at it from maybe the political freedom today. But let's look at a child in Eastern Cape. For example, I've been going to the Eastern Cape, and you find where children, when you talk about human dignity, where children, they still use pit latrine toilets, the toilet where they dig the hole. And children have been dying, falling in those pit latrine toilets. Yet when a time of campaign and elections comes, politicians are not afraid to go and take a polling station into that village, but they can't take a toilet into a school. They can't take water. They can't take clean water. So are there steps that you feel our African leaders must begin to take? What are the steps that African leaders should take, and how do we follow up that those human rights declarations which we are celebrating today, they are not just being celebrated, but these human rights are coming to effect? Pick it up from there.
Thank you, Doctor. You have highlighted very important aspects when we look at Africa in general in terms of basic human rights. Talking about basic human rights, we see when we look, for instance, at the Bill of Rights in South African Constitution. This is just an example. And remember I said, we find these Bill of Rights constitution in Africa, the right of education, the right to the right to have a shelter, the rights. So we have many rights. The right to freedom of religion, freedom of movement. So we have all these rights, which today the question would be, are they respected? So talking about steps that leaders order to see these rights to be implemented. Leaders have to be accountable. We're still struggling in Africa. And you will notice that every leader who comes to power, one of the first things that he promised is to respect these freedom that that are recognized to all human beings. But unfortunately, when they come to power, they don't respect this all human rights that they promised. So we still have a problem in terms of implementation, and one of the steps that need to be taken into account is the accountability, which lack in many leaders in Africa, and this unwillingness to implement basic rights. Probably the reason will be when these rights are implemented, probably they're going to shaken their power. So we have a lot of challenges in terms of implementing these human rights. But we have to say that since the ratification of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but we have seen that there is some progress. So we need to acknowledge that there is some progress, although it is still at the stage of just an ideal. We still are waiting for full implementation, but we can say that we are somewhere, and we are moving forward. Although up to now there is no full implementation of human
All right. I'm not sure if you can be able to hear me because the network seems to be breaking on your side. Are you still there?
Yes, doctor, I can hear you.
Okay. Now, I want us to look at the next. All right. I've got Reverend Ruben Sambo watching and following from Zambia. He is the vice president. Here in South Africa, we said deputy president of the former ruling party, which is the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy. Thank you, Honorable Sambo, for tuning in today. We've got a number of people, double honor coming tonight, and also a number of other people that are joining us. Now, I want to bring in, and please, those of you that are participating, please, you can type your questions, comments as well. Jacob from, I would wish to know how is my good friends doing in Kenya, getting ready for elections very soon. How are we going to see Raila Odinga getting into office, or are we seeing William Ruto? We want to hear about that. Okay, the thing that I want us to look at now is controversial human rights. There is what we call controversial human rights in the continent of Africa. And since this is a Human Rights Week, we have to look at controversial human rights. Let's look at it from the micro aspect before we get to the macro problems of the continent. The micro aspect starts from country to country. When we look at South Africa right now, we know that South Africa has been dealing with the right to life, which in other words, there is a bill that was in fact on parliament that has to do with euthanasia, whereby it's called euthanasia assisted suicide, where if a person has been very sick, and they feel they don't want to continue to be in that pain, then they have a right to ask a doctor to say, inject me with this, whatever, and they die. Those are what we call controversial human rights. There are also other human rights that, of course, South Africa is not at that level, but other countries that are watching us right now, like, for example, the gay rights, like I see people from Kenya are watching today. We have seen in other countries where gay people, they get arrested and victimized, okay? So we need to look at all that. Then we also look at, these are controversial human rights that I'm talking about. We also look at other countries where, for example, when a child is born, maybe with certain disabilities, then the doctors, they terminate. In other countries, they call it abortion. You know, in South Africa, you know what South Africa is. South Africa has dealt with a lot of all those things. Now, as a continent, how do we deal? Because, Mr. Kabwe, on this one, we need to know, yes, the United Nations has given us the framework. I call it the framework of human rights. But we've got these micro issues around us as a continent. How do we deal with these controversial human rights? How do we deal with them? Because if, for example, you go to Zambia, I don't know now with the current government, but I've known that Zambia, it's a Christian country. So because of it being a Christian nation, the LGBT community, okay, the gay community, as it may be called, gay and lesbian and transgender community, they find as if their rights are stepped upon. How do we deal with these issues as leaders politically? I call them controversial human rights. Pick it up from there.
Thank you, Doctor. So thank you, Doctor, for this question. As we said before, all African countries, for now, we can say ratified this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And
The network seems to be freezing. I'm not sure if you are able to get me clearly. Wow, for those of you who are tuning in, and we are looking at human rights, and today being a Human Rights Day, my guest speaker tonight is Mr. Kabwe Didier from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and he's expounding with us on how do we follow, how do we go about dealing with these human rights that were declared just after the Second World War. And we have dealt with the basics of the basic human right. And right now, we were about to begin to look at the controversial human rights that varies from country to country, community to community, or nation to nation. So we just had started dealing with that, and I'm hoping that it tunes in immediately. It seems it's a network challenge where he is. Maybe it's raining or what, but the network seems to be failing him on this side. But ladies and gentlemen, like we have been speaking, I would want to hear participation from those that are out there, and you are tuned in from maybe other parts of the world. If you can communicate with us, what does it mean when we speak about these human rights? Now, we are looking at controversial ones at the moment. We were looking at, we wanted to look at euthanasia as one of the rights that South Africa has been putting in place. We wanted to look at also in a number of other African countries which are dealing with these, what is known as the LGBTQI. Those are also other human rights that others feel they are stepped upon, and they cannot continue with that. We wanted also to look at human rights that have to do with women and children. Are the rights of women and children being respected? Then we wanted to sum it up with what is known as human rights, because these things, they seem not to just apply to us. Therefore, we have to realize that we have got a lot of people that celebrated this Human Rights Day, and yet we as the African people are still tied up and our rights are overlooked. We have seen what has been going on in Ukraine and Russia, when the students who were from an African descent needed to leave Ukraine to Poland or to Hungary, and they want to come back to their countries. We saw what is known as segregation, where human dignity is not being followed. Why? Because some people are looked at the color of the skin, and then you are limited from there. So, guys, I wish to have continued the class tonight, but my lecturer there seems to be having a very good challenge with network. I hope you have had 2 or 3 points that we can go home with tonight on how do we deal with these human rights laws, because the human rights deliberations that we speak about. So I will almost 9 o'clock now. So it's very important that you take time to go through this video again, share it, and let's make sure that the time we come back, I'll bring my lecturer back. Hopefully tomorrow we can continue. Maybe we can look at human rights tomorrow again in the night. But during the day, we will look at something different and we will share it with you. Okay, most by those of you who are with us on this platform. Remember, this is the African Institute of Leadership and Governance. We are not just a social media group, but we are there to educate each other that Africa is governed well. We depend on you and we depend on your input. So have a wonderful evening as we go tonight. Au revoir, bonne nuit, asante sana, Mungu abariki Afrika. Bye-bye.